After the chaos of the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift just wanted a quiet flight, a moment of peace. But at the boarding gate, she faced something unexpected, another humiliation. A woman took one look at her and decided she didn't belong in first class. What happened next? She never saw it coming. Taylor stood at the first-class boarding gate, adjusting the strap of her handbag. She wasn't trying to stand out, just another passenger, dressed casually in an oversized hoodie, sunglasses shielding her eyes. No security, no entourage. Just Taylor Swift, hoping for a quiet flight. But the woman in front of her had already noticed. She was impeccably dressed, her designer heels clicking against the floor as she shifted impatiently. A luxury handbag rested on her arm, the kind meant to show status, not just hold belongings. And as Taylor took a step forward, the woman suddenly cut in front of her. "Excuse me," the woman said, her tone sharp, clipped, authoritative. Her eyes flicked up and down Taylor's outfit, then settled on her face with mild disdain. "First class is for paying customers only." A few passengers nearby paused, their conversations fading as they sensed the tension shift. Taylor just blinked, taking in the woman's words. No anger, no immediate reaction, just quiet calculation. She had seen this before. The assumption. The arrogance. The way some people sized you up and decided, in an instant, that you didn't belong. But what Taylor did next? That was what no one expected. Taylor remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable behind the dark lenses of her sunglasses. She wasn't flustered, wasn't offended. Just quietly absorbing the woman's words. It wasn't the first time someone had judged her on sight. Dressed casually, no flashy jewelry, no designer labels, just an oversized hoodie and well-worn sneakers, Taylor looked like any other traveler trying to get through the airport without hassle. But to this woman, that wasn't enough. She wasn't supposed to fit in. Taylor tilted her head slightly, her voice calm, composed. "I am in first class." The woman let out a short, mocking laugh, shaking her head like she'd heard something ridiculous. "Oh, sure you are." Her voice dripped with condescension, like she was humoring some clueless young girl who had wandered into the wrong line. A few heads turned. People in the line started whispering. Some passengers stole quick glances, eyes widening in recognition. They knew exactly who Taylor Swift was. But the woman? She remained completely clueless. Before Taylor could respond, a flight attendant stepped forward, her professional smile widening the moment she recognized who was standing before her. "Ms. Swift, welcome. You're all set, right this way," she said smoothly, gesturing toward the boarding lane reserved for first-class passengers. Taylor nodded politely, offering a small, appreciative smile. No fuss, no need for explanations. But the woman wasn't letting this go. Her posture stiffened, her well-manicured fingers tightening around the strap of her designer bag. The attendant's acknowledgement should have been the end of it, but instead, she let out a sharp breath, crossing her arms. "Are you sure?" she pressed, her voice edged with suspicion. "I've seen people try to sneak into first class before." The murmurs in the line grew louder. Taylor didn't need to glance around to know that more people were watching now. She could feel the shift, the weight of silent eyes taking in the interaction, the hushed gasps from passengers who had recognized her the moment they saw her. The audacity of the woman's words hung in the air. But Taylor? She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just smiled. A slow, quiet, knowing smile. And without another word, she stepped forward, moving past the woman as if the conversation had never happened. The woman, still oblivious, huffed, rolling her eyes before boarding ahead of her. What she didn't realize, what she still hadn't figured out, was that she had just humiliated herself in front of one of the most famous people on the planet. And very soon, she was going to regret every word. Taylor settled into her first-class seat, placing her bag neatly at her feet and adjusting her oversized hoodie. She pulled out her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly, fully aware of the lingering glances around her. She didn't mind. She was used to it. A few rows ahead, the same woman who had confronted her was already seated, her magazine spread open as she flipped through the glossy pages with sharp, impatient flicks. She still had no idea. But the rest of the cabin? They were catching on. Passengers subtly turned their heads, exchanging whispers, nudging each other. Some reached for their phones, sneaking quick glances at Taylor, their expressions shifting from surprise to amusement. They knew exactly who she was. The woman, however, remained oblivious, far too consumed with finding new things to complain about. "Excuse me," she called out, waving down a flight attendant before the plane had even taken off. Her voice carried an air of entitlement, clipped and impatient. The young attendant hurried over. "Yes, ma'am. How can I assist you?" The woman sighed, adjusting her silk scarf dramatically. "It's absolutely stifling in here. Can you do something about the air conditioning?" The attendant remained professional, nodding politely. "I'll check on that for you." As the attendant moved away, the woman let out another frustrated sigh, shifting in her seat as if the very act of being on this flight was some terrible inconvenience. Taylor remained quiet, tucking her headphones into her ears, but she could still hear every word. Not long after, the drinks were served. Taylor, ever the polite and gracious traveler, looked up with a warm smile. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice kind and genuine as she accepted her drink. The flight attendant beamed in response, nodding appreciatively before moving down the aisle. Then, moments later. "Excuse me," the woman's sharp voice cut through the calm atmosphere once again. Another flight attendant approached. "Is there something else I can do for you, ma'am?" The woman pursed her lips, lifting her glass slightly. "This water isn't even cold. Is it too much to ask for properly chilled water in first class?" The attendant, keeping her patience intact, nodded. "I'll see what I can do." Passengers around her began exchanging looks, the rolling of eyes barely concealed. Some whispered quietly to their seatmates, amusement dancing in their expressions. Taylor sipped her drink, her focus seemingly on her phone. But she had noticed everything. And so had everyone else. Because the real irony? The woman was so busy making a scene, so fixated on proving her own importance, that she still hadn't realized who was sitting just a few feet behind her. But soon? That was about to change. The cabin had settled into a quiet hum, the soft rustling of magazines, the occasional clink of glasses, and the steady drone of the plane cruising at altitude. Taylor remained in her seat, scrolling through her phone, unbothered. The entitled woman ahead of her, however, continued to huff and shift uncomfortably, still irritated at the poor service she believed she was receiving. And then, it happened. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, sitting a few rows back, suddenly let out a loud gasp. "Mom! That's Taylor Swift." Her voice carried through the cabin, high-pitched with excitement, slicing through the otherwise quiet atmosphere. The energy in the cabin shifted instantly. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Passengers who had been minding their own business suddenly perked up, eyes widening as they followed the young girl's gaze. Taylor, ever gracious, looked up from her phone, a small, amused smile playing on her lips. The little girl and her mother were already standing, hesitating slightly before moving down the aisle toward her. The mom gave a sheepish smile. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my daughter is a huge fan. Would it be okay to take a picture?" Without hesitation, Taylor nodded, her smile warm and genuine. "Of course. What's your name?" The little girl, practically vibrating with excitement, stammered out, "Emma." "Nice to meet you, Emma," Taylor said, adjusting her sunglasses as she leaned in for a quick photo. Passengers around them smiled, some taking out their phones to capture the moment. The mood in first class had completely changed. What was once just another flight was now a memory they would never forget. But the woman? She froze. Her magazine lowered slightly, and for the first time, she slowly turned her head toward Taylor. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted from the adoring fans, to Taylor, to the passengers whispering in hushed voices. It was as if reality had just slammed into her. She had mocked Taylor Swift. She had tried to keep Taylor Swift from boarding first class. And now? She was sitting just feet away from one of the most famous women in the world. Her breath caught, her fingers gripping the magazine tightly as she looked straight ahead, willing herself to disappear. But there was no undoing it now. The moment hung in the air, thick with realization. The woman, who had carried herself with such unshakable confidence, now sat frozen, gripping her magazine like it was a lifeline. Her once proud posture had collapsed into something smaller, something that reeked of regret. She had mocked Taylor Swift. She had assumed Taylor didn't belong. And now? She was sitting just feet away from one of the most famous, influential, and powerful women in the world. The energy in the cabin had completely shifted against her. Passengers, once indifferent, were now stealing glances at her, some with amusement, some with quiet judgment. It was clear they knew what had just happened. Taylor, on the other hand? She hadn't even acknowledged the woman's growing discomfort. She was still smiling warmly, talking to Emma, the young fan who now had the memory of a lifetime. "You're so sweet, Emma. Do you have a favorite song?" The little girl, beaming with excitement, nodded quickly. "Yes. Lover." Taylor chuckled. "That's a great one. You've got good taste." The flight attendant, having witnessed the entire moment, smiled in Taylor's direction, silently appreciating how effortlessly she handled the situation. But the woman? She was spiraling. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, her eyes darting around the cabin as if looking for an escape. She swallowed hard, her earlier arrogance completely gone. She suddenly realized just how loud she had been before, her complaints about the air conditioning, the water temperature, the seating. She had acted like she was the most important person on the plane. And yet, the real VIP, the actual icon, had been sitting right behind her the entire time. Her throat tightened, and she barely whispered to herself. "I had no idea." But it didn't matter. No one was paying attention to her anymore. The moment had passed her by. And she would have to sit there for the rest of the flight, drowning in the weight of her own humiliation. By the time the plane touched down, the internet was already on fire. Passengers who had witnessed the entire exchange couldn't type fast enough, eager to share what they had just seen. A tweet appeared within minutes. "Some lady just tried to tell Taylor Swift she doesn't belong in first class. Biggest mistake of her life." It instantly gained traction, likes, retweets, comments pouring in. The internet loved nothing more than a tale of poetic justice, and this? This was golden. Then came another. Imagine gatekeeping a plane seat from Taylor Swift. The audacity. By the time Taylor gracefully exited the plane, still smiling at the young fan she had taken a photo with, her name was already trending worldwide. The reactions came fast. Fans were outraged at the entitlement. Swifties flooded the replies, calling the woman out. Memes were born. And then, the celebrities joined in. Serena Williams tweeted within the hour. "People really have no idea who they're talking to these days." Lana Del Rey took to Instagram, posting a simple but effective message. "Some people are so out of touch." The comments were brutal. That woman woke up and chose the worst decision of her life. Taylor Swift just won a fight she didn't even know she was in. Imagine trying to humiliate someone, only to find out they have a stadium tour that makes more money than your entire existence. The internet was having a field day. Meanwhile, the woman from the plane? She had no idea what was coming. Not yet. But by the time she checked her phone, she'd find herself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. As the seatbelt signs switched off, passengers began gathering their belongings, stretching after the long flight. The atmosphere inside the cabin was a mix of excitement and quiet conversations, but for one person, the entitled woman, there was only one thought running through her mind. She had tried to embarrass Taylor Swift. And now, the entire world knew it. She hesitated, still gripping the armrests of her seat as the line to deboard slowly moved forward. Her hands felt clammy, her face still hot from the realization that had hit her like a freight train mid-flight. Taylor was just a few steps ahead, calm and composed as she collected her bag, thanking the flight attendants with a polite smile. The woman felt her chest tighten. Should she say something? Would it even matter? She opened her mouth, her voice hesitant, unsure for the first time all day. I didn't realize who you were, she finally stammered, barely above a whisper. Taylor paused for half a second, her back still turned to the woman. Then, slowly, she turned her head just slightly, offering the simplest, most effortless response possible. A small, polite nod. No words. No resentment. Just a quiet, knowing acknowledgement. And then, without another glance, she walked away. She didn't need an apology. She didn't need to hear excuses. Because the lesson had already been learned. The woman stood frozen in place, watching Taylor disappear through the airport terminal, knowing that she would never forget this moment for the rest of her life. By the time Taylor had reached her destination, the internet had already turned the entire incident into a full-blown viral sensation. Social media was divided, but only in how they chose to interpret the story. Some saw it as a lesson in classism, a reminder that wealth and status don't always come in designer handbags and tailored suits. Others called it an example of entitlement, proof that some people will always assume they are more important, until reality humbles them. But no matter how it was framed, one thing was certain. The woman on that flight had made a mistake she could never take back. Taylor? She never addressed it. She didn't need to. Because the internet had already made up its mind for her. Tweets, memes, headlines, they all told the story better than any press release ever could. Next time, maybe don't judge someone just by their hoodie. A simple truth. And now? The world wouldn't forget it.